go ahead. Okay, I think we are live. We have a lot. Yeah, we accumulate like 4 weeks worth. Yes. You, you know, half the reason I started these office hours is so that I can ask the questions. Yeah, but now we have a dedicated forum for answering them. Oh, wait. Hold on one sec. They said can't hear Curt. What the hell? Oh, wait. Sorry, folks. One sec. This is probably something on my end. Okay, I should have noticed that earlier. Curt, say something.
One, two, three.
Okay. Folks on the live stream, can you hear Curt now?
Vernon Cotter lies 3 days ride south of Carolina off the Governor's Road and at the base of the hill look at the same name. Some might call it a seaport and some might call it a troop station, but neither is true. It's a small town with a few people scattered a little spirit. The reason is the city is old, it's older than men
Okay,
who live there.
we're good.
Good.
Slight problem.
Okay, so we start over.
Sure.
All right, this is I'm Curt Doolittle from the Natural Law Institute. I'm here joined today with Francis and Martin, where this is our office hours Q&A. And we're going to answer as many questions. We have a long list of questions. We usually only get through a few. The reason is they keep getting harder every session so, with longer answers. Today is Friday, March 1st, 2024. Usually I think I don't like to read the questions. So
I'll
somebody
read
else
them.
read.
All right. So first question is for me. So Curt, how does trading financial assets by individual speculators follow or violate the law of reciprocity, especially pertaining to the commons and civilizational capital? And how does it vary based on the type of financial asset, except, for example, fixed income, stocks, futures, option derivatives, or even crypto? And what about when the party engaging in the speculation changes from individual to groups of individuals, investment banks, and a larger scale financial institutions such as the Fed?
Well, this is a really fascinating question. It's also one that I could spend like a day on. So we'll try to summarize it as the central issue. I think that the libertarians and the market advocates and even the classical liberals tend to frame the stock market as if it's a consumer good. In other words, where I can go to the store and make a choice about what I want, and the prices are higher and lower. Great. Um, and so this is an this is like all classical economics. It's overly optimistic. For example, things don't head toward equilibrium; they head toward disequilibrium. Right? I mean, so there's all sorts of really, and only then do things change. Right? They tend to equilibrate to the point where people are always trying to discover a disequilibrium to benefit from. So I don't want to get lost in that. I just want to make a point of that this is one of those optimistic pro-capitalist, pro-market rules that that presume that the stock market works like the like the
Commodities market, or sorry,
the
like the
the goods
supermarket.
and goods, services, and
Hmm.
information market, consumer
Can I
market.
just interject one point? When you say the market, in this case, the financial market tends to toward disequilibrium versus equilibrium, you mean in a perfectly functional marketplace as we understand it, let's say bread from supermarkets, right? They should just it's a price discovery mechanism, and you go to every supermarket, the price of a loaf of bread is roughly equivalent. They may be
Yes,
off by a few cents. But in the
right,
financial market, in terms of disequilibrium, you always have actors, agents trying to find arbitrage opportunities. You
correct.
buy high, sell. Well, you want to buy high, sell low, unless you're doing
Buy
unless you're
low,
doing
sell high.
buy low, sell high. I was going to say unless you're doing some kind of
That
short
has
selling,
been my strategy.
sell high, buy low. There we go.
Right, but when in fact that this would be like saying, I can get 1 million people to show up at the supermarkets and buy all the bread, right? Which is something the financial sector can do and the public citizen cannot. So the there's a asymmetry, excuse me, gotta confuse my terms here. Asymmetry of capacity to both obtain, use, and apply information. And so whenever the real question is here is when is the financial sector extractive versus when it is productive? Because the claims are it's discovering prices, but prices of what for whom? It's true that it's relatively true that you will find it um, for oil, a commodity like oil, that the price around the world will be competitive, right, within the limits that producers allow it to
Yeah,
be.
futures contract, which has
Hmm?
been futures contracts, which has been around for, as I learned, 500 years. The Japanese
Yes,
invented it.
forever. And so, why do you buy a futures? Why do you buy futures? If you're the seller, right, and you're the buyer, why does the buyer want to buy a future, and why does the seller want to sell a future?
So the sellers, i.e., producers, will sell futures contract in order to gain the capital necessary to offset. I used to know this, to offset price fluctuation. So let's
Correct.
say that you head into planting season, you don't know how the crop is actually going to turn out. If the crop turn out badly, and then or actually, it's the other way around. If it's a bumper year and there's too much crop in the market, then you won't get enough for to sustain your business operations and so on. So you sell a futures contract so that the buyer can then say, I'm going to buy certain bushels at this fixed price, and then you as a farmer recovers your costs and everything. For the buyer, they want to offset pricing risk in case you are Kellogg's and you're making cornflakes and you don't want the price of corn. If this is a poor year, you don't want the price of corn to go shot to the roof because your end consumers probably won't buy your cornflakes and they're going to buy some other breakfast cereal.
Mhm. So that seems like a good bet for both parties. It is, right? Future's great. So now what happens when uh, I can when I have a vast asymmetry, excuse me, let's not, let's leave that as an example. I don't want to, I want to leave that as an example of reciprocity. What you're both doing is you're distributing risk, right? Both sides are basically making assessment of, okay, I'm going to price risk into this given what I know. Okay, what happened? Okay, so okay, I got to stop trying to falsify that and stick with it. So now, what condition? There are a couple of conditions that happen in the market that are not so reciprocal. So how much of the time do people have inside information that ends up being extractive of consumer investor?
Probably all the time.
Is why everybody says, unless you have a great deal of knowledge of an industry so that you can predict it as well as anybody else, or at least if you have a great deal of understanding of some subsector of the predictable interests of the popular consumers, or somebody's moving some asset around. Like I could make money on currency trades forever, because it's so, to me it's obvious what's going to happen. But so some people are really good at saying consumer sentiment is going to be like this, or predicting, a fashionable product, good or service, or so in those cases that's great. But too often, if you have inside information, and I've done enough IPOs and stuff like that, and I understand how much scamitude goes on in these things. Um, it's very often very extractive from consumer investors, retail investors, which is why everybody tells you throw your money in a mutual fund unless you have extraordinary knowledge of something. Even that's probably false, because the performance of mutual funds and the market in general is based on a demographic process that occurred over the past century. It's not necessarily based on increases in productivity at all. So the boomer problem, so to speak, in the market is that the boomers inflated the market. Now they're going to deflate the market. So if I go through this, so the question is, the first level of question is, some of the deals are reciprocal. Some portion of the deals are irreciprocal, right? Some portion of the deals are questionable. So let's talk about when you're a bank and I buy your loans, and some third-party rating agency has created this debt instrument, right? This bundled them together, created debt instrument. Now, we've seen that this credit rating shit is bullshit, right? I mean, this doesn't mean
Yeah,
anything.
CDO in 2008, that proves it all.
Right. I mean, so that's a good example. So so what we're buying debt instruments, but what I'm buying from you is really the stream of payments that come from it, right? That's what I'm really buying.
Hmm.
So I bought because you really want to get the money back so you can do another set of loans and sell that set of loans. So you can get your money back and sell the next set of loans. So that's how this game works, right? Basically, banks are producing debt instruments, blocks of debt instruments that produce revenue streams. And so what you're doing when you buy a debt instrument, right, like that, when you buy these buy into a mortgage, is that you're buying what you hope is a predictable revenue stream versus some volatility you expect, say, for some other reason. I'm watching your face to make sure you're
Yep,
following.
I understand.
Yeah, right. So, so, um, so what happens here is there's a malincentive on the portion on the part of the bank and the lending authority to misrepresent the viability of that income stream. So what will happen is, now that I've bought your debts and I see they're performing lower, I'm going to sell them again to somebody else. And then that person's going to get enough income stream out of it. It's going to sell it to somebody else. The same thing happens with investors and companies. So what's happening here is the consumer is paying this continuous revenue stream, but where are the losses accumulating? They're accumulating they're accumulating in the discount each buyer right? Each person who buys the debt is buying it from someone who's no longer getting no longer able to count on that revenue stream, but has gotten paid for it. So he's gotten a discount, right? So if I generated $1 million worth of loans or $1 billion, whatever, right? Then you buy there most of the payment on the equity, right? The equity is upfront. So the debt to the consumer maintains the same. Then I go over to the next guy and he burns a little more of that too, and he burns a little. So this thing just keeps uh, getting shuffled around. Now, question is that reciprocal?
Well, it breaks the I I believe it breaks the fully informed clause.
Correct.
Because if the seller of those bonds had done their due diligence to fully inform the buyer, I doubt the buyer actually would have taken these bad loans off their hands.
Correct. And how hard is it to vet those loans? That's what rating companies are for,
Right.
right? So it's really hard to vet
Hmm.
those
I
loans.
was going to say
But
it's probably very hard.
right. So who pays the vetting the company that vets the rating company that vets them?
Well, I'm pretty sure the seller does.
The seller does, right? So you have all these malincentives.
Hmm.
So there's an irreciprocal. After this trend is established, that tends not to be the case because now the price is being determined by the market, right? But still, so I always think so. It's interesting. So the consumer does not obtain any of these discounts, right? So you got a distribution of people in here. These people are going to pay absolutely. These people are probably going to pay, and these people are probably not, and these people absolutely aren't going to pay, right? So you're just looking at this income stream. It's promised you this, it's gotten you this. This you can sort of predict the market for the next X couple of years and say, well, I'll lose that much now, but over then I'll gain, it's just a game of predicting valuations. I look at that and I'm like, well, that violates the principle, the original principle, which is why what we recommend is that you can sell interest in the loan, but you can't, in other words, interest in the returns of the loan, but you have to hold the asset. In other words, if you originate an asset, you have to hold the liability of it. It's the only way to maintain it. The same applies for debt instruments like bonds and things like that, right? Bonds are a little better version. To they attempt to make it, but we all know what junk bonds are,
Oh yeah.
right? So
What
junk
is it
bonds.
like B rated or actually C rated or
Oh,
probably?
right. So what you do is somebody originated $1 million worth of loans, and what you're looking at is not the purchase of the loan so much as the income stream from it, right? So you might find value in this income stream gain. God knows why, but you might find value in saying, I can buy this for 20 cents on the dollar, but I can maintain that income stream. At some point, you might get it down to where you're buying an income stream that is actually somewhat worth what the system with the block of debt instruments is worth, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
why they group all these debt instruments together, is so that you have an equilibrating force between the better and the worse ones. Of course, what everybody wants is only the good ones, but the banks can't make money that way, or the
Hmm.
lenders can't make money that way. I'm trying to go make sure I've gone through all these.
So we talked
Um,
about fixed income, and then we talked about futures, at least from the in the futures market, at least from the large spec, which are the purchasers of the futures
right.
contract, and from the large commercials, which are the producers' perspective. That exchange is or should be most of the part reciprocal. And then
So, but go ahead.
I think we briefly touched into stocks. Stocks at this point has so much information asymmetry in it.
Exactly. So that's the problem with stocks, is that it is the most. So we went from things that are like, there's information asymmetry in the bundle or the quality, right? Right. But that dissipates as reality has its effect on the portfolio, whatever's bundle in the portfolio of debt instruments, right? Mortgages or whatever they are.
Hmm.
Now let's go over to stocks. It's like, when do you discover this symmetric information? When do you discover the price? You fucking don't, right? Because it's always just demand based. Whereas your revenue from a debt instrument, well, I mean, as long as people can pay it, they do,
Hmm.
right? But what happens with a stock? I mean, it's all based on belief.
Yeah, based on a large part based on goodwill.
Right. This is my problem with accounting that I've bitched about for years, and I don't talk about it with you guys much because it's something I worried about in the past. But the way they do accounting, in even in the best companies, is using a chart of accounts and whatever. And if you're really good, you write a macro that takes a certain kind of uh, uh, income or expense, right? And you put it into all these accounts, but it disappears, right? The causality disappears when you do that.
What do you mean the causality disappears?
So I'm trying to, let's see if I started this probably the wrong side, but uh, so how do you know where stuff came from meaningfully? You have to go trace it down into the system, which gets very difficult. So what I've found is that what I want I view the value of a company as the liquidation value. In other words, it turns out that, you've been selling dangerous drugs to people knowingly for the past 10 years, right? Right. Or that what's the Enron example? You've been committing profound fraud on an extraordinary scale. Well, what happens to the value of your company? It goes to the liquidation value.
Hmm.
So my view of a company is, what's its liquidation value?
So you're looking at the book value. If you
Well, the
liquidate
book,
everything,
right, but the book value is is usually based on what assets it has
hmm,
that can be borrowed against, not against the liquidation value. In other words, the book value is usually far higher than the liquidation value.
oh, interesting.
When I was 25 years old, I bought a division. Litton's a big company, or at least it was. But I bought a division of Litton for $60,000. Right. So when I was 25. So um, you can, right, and people, and why? Because people are willing, they just want the money doesn't matter. Make the fucking problem go away,
Hmm.
right? So what was the liquidation value of that division? It
Well,
was
sixty
sixty
thousand
thousand dollars.
dollars.
What was on the books? Whatever they wrote off, something like 8 million or 10 million, something like that.
Okay, well, you got dollars on the pennies.
So so I enjoyed doing that for a living. I got to tell you that buying and selling companies was fun. So, uh, so, uh, so when I bought that company, I mean, I did it I did it a dirty deal, right? I mean, I'm not going to say I was a virtuous character here. I went and bought the lease out from under them, so they had no choice but to sell it to me. But anyway, um, where are we now? Oh, so the liquidation value of the company. I want to know the liquidation value of a company. The second thing I want to know is um, what the book value is. In other words, what's the inventory of assets at their current depreciation, right? That's the second thing. Right, what's the next thing I want to know? I want to know profits and loss from operations on those assets, right? In other words, right? So that's what I want to know on a cash basis. So I know the cash flow of the organization. All right. So the last thing I want to know is, okay, let's talk. What you tracking me or what? What are you thinking? Oh, you're silent. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm tracking you. Just for the audience, I showed a screenshot, or rather a web page from Finviz on NVIDIA, right? All the things that you're talking about here, those are all financial data that are out there for public traded companies.
Well, to some degree, I don't want to take a sidestep. But you look at NVIDIA. I mean, people are throwing money at that like
Hmm.
insane because they've got the only means of manufacturing these things at any, I mean, or at least designing them at any scale. And so and so there also, but you have the combination of a near monopoly, a portfolio effect, right, which is they're really big, right? But you also have a risk effect, which is, somebody can come. There's no way. There's nothing special about what they're doing except they've got the $1 billion of infrastructure lined up to produce these things.
I'm looking
That's the
on
problem.
their price to book ratio, right? This is the so you take the price of the stock and you divide by the book value of the company. The price to book ratio is at 46x,
Which is insane.
and price to cash is at 77 times. So their stock is now priced at $807, or just call it $800. The amount of book value is $17 per share, and cash is $10 a share.
Right. So what isn't 20 about the is it 20 is about the limit, right?
What?
If I see somebody who's at a at about a 20 times instead of that would be about where the limit where I would
Oh,
invest.
I see what you mean. In terms of value hunting and so on.
Yes,
Well, in
yes.
value hunting, I like to look for price to book ratio below one.
Well, exactly, right? I mean, but there you might look at growth companies differently from return companies. So my point here is that the for I really I have one whole arc to cover yet, and I want to not lose track of what I'm thinking here, which is that uh, when you get into stocks, there's a huge asymmetry of knowledge, and it's highly speculative. And the idea that you actually own something is what you own is the percentage chance of appreciation or the percentage chance of resistance to depreciation. Because inflation is always going on, therefore that you would hopefully that would be that would be some mediation of inflation in the holding of an asset. The great thing about holding a stock asset for investors, but shitty for employees, is that when they buy these things, they're very liquid. You can sell as long as there's some demand. You can usually sell them, and so what that means is that the the executives and owners who run the business are can't get out. The employees have no chance of getting out. So I did it the wrong way. The employees have no chance of getting out. The owners, the real owner operators, have very little chance of getting out. But the investors who own stocks, they can get in and out easily.
When you say get out, you mean
Liquid. They can get liquidity if they need to.
oh, by selling the stock, or
Right.
yeah.
So like, so when I if I built, if I built a bunch of companies, So I have to think about it as, who am I going to sell this fucking thing to? I've built over 5 years or 2 years or 10 years. So if I go sell this thing, I want to know who am I going to sell it to and what are they going to pay me for it? And so, you look at uh, product company, uh, intellectual property companies, product companies, and service companies very differently, right? Because the intellectual property is a rent, right? The productivity is at least a network effect, and a service company is highly volatile, right? It's dependent upon the economy. So you have these different economies. So what bothers me in this whole thing is that there's a presumed symmetry, but there's asymmetry of risk. That's okay. There's asymmetry of influence, and there's a vast asymmetry of knowledge. And so with stocks, it's really uh, it's really the stock market is highly powerful in creating a gambling session, but which encourages entrepreneurs to take risks they otherwise would not, because the windfall opportunity is great. Certainly has been for me. So the but the real issue is, look at the increase in asymmetry of knowledge as we're going from one along this little path. Now let's get to the really bad stuff.
The
So who has all
derivatives.
what?
The derivatives.
Well, I mean, I don't even want to go there. I
Oh,
just figure
that's not the real bad stuff.
well, I mean, because everybody knows, right? I mean, um, so what we might as well touch it, right? Touch on it. But I mean, it's like there've been movies made about it, so I assume that people get it. So
Sorry,
basically,
just to interject a second, just in case the audience is not familiar with the concept of options derivatives. There, when you buy a stock, you're actually holding a fractional share of the company and the profits and so on. Derivatives are nothing other than the percept value. Let's see if I can say this right. It's the market participant um, perception on whether a underlying asset will go up or down.
yeah, but why would you buy one?
Because of the even more vast risk of going, well, us just put it this way. If the underlying asset, let's say you have if you have a stock that's worth $100, if the underlying asset goes up by $1, if you're buying stock, you just gain 1%. But depends on where if you buy a derivative instrument, depends on where you buy the strike. It could be, let's say you bought a $101, you buy a strike, a call option at 101. When the stock is worth, when the stock was at 100, that out of money options, it's probably only worth 50 cents. When it reaches a dollar, or when the price reaches 101, the premium of that strike, of that options derivative, can actually go up 200% and go to, say, a dollar. It's just even it's just like in physics, right? When you look at derivatives, they they move in they usually move in tandem with an underlying asset,
Yes,
but they move in asymmetric ways.
right. So I think you need to emphasize one point is they're bought on margin. In other words, how
Mm,
often are they bought on margin?
technically, no. You don't have to purchase derivatives on the
No, I
margin.
didn't say, I didn't mean that. I said, how often are they bought on margin?
I don't know.
Right. So that's the problem, is you can buy them on margin. Right. And so that's what happened, right? People were buying these things on margin. And so you would put a little money in order to, as insurance, right? And so when the margin got called and you were down, you only put in $1, but now it's lost $100, and so per share, right? And so you lose 100 instead of just the dollar.
Um, I don't know if people or how often people buy options derivatives on the margin. I know that futures traders, at least small speculators, typically buy them on the margin because that's why they do it, right? You spending very little money down, you actually control what's the size of a contract, 100 shares or 100 contracts of the underlying futures and so on, so that it's a form of leverage. I don't know
Right.
if most option traders do that though, because then if
I
they
don't
do,
know. I just know that if I look it up, it's going to say that uh,
there are certainly ways that you can get into trouble into options, such as writing a naked call.
I'm trying to find the data right now and I'm not finding it. All right, so so there if you buy, let's say you buy swaps, all right? Should we go into this level of detail, or is this not useful for
I think we may be going a little too deep.
too
Let's just
deep? All
stick
right,
to the
let's
reciprocity question
okay.
because we still
We're
have
trying,
crypto to cover.
right. Well, the now actually I'm getting to the thing that's not that people don't think about, which is where is all this money coming from? In other words, uh, there is, if you and I make money in business or just in our jobs and we invest money in the market, that's money is coming from productivity. But how much of that money comes from, say, the mortgages we just talked about, or or is invested on behalf of insurance firms, or is invested on behalf of what do you call it, pension firms, or invested on behalf of, uh, let's say, school districts for their, right, for their futures. Because most of these pensions are unfunded, right? I mean, we know this, right? I mean, it's the dirty secret of America is that all these people have pensions. There's no way they can get paid. Um, because they're unfunded. So I'm in Connecticut, and Connecticut is notorious for the fact that if you work for the state, it's like golden handcuffs, because because the state is bankrupt because all the money goes to state employee pensions. So but they're even then they're unfunded. There's not enough revenue coming in to fund them. So um, so when we get to these institutions, if who do you think gives supplies the VCs with money, or who buys these big blocks of stock, or who gives their money to these big firms to manage for them? It's all these
Yeah,
organizations and institutions. That's what they mean. Institutional investor means someone with a large block of money they're managing for someone else, right? So now, when so so what happens is how much of that money is that's being taken from the people and put in the market is rents, or the rent seeking.
by the institutional investors.
Yes, yes.
When you say how much of that money is being put into the market as rent, mm, okay,
You took
I'm
consumer mortgages out of it, consumer credit cards out of it. Um, what would happen or consumer insurance out of it, mortgage insurance out of it. You took there's an awful lot of money out there that's unfunded rents. That's number one. Number two is because those are the rents, then because there's so much money available in rents, do I seek where do I put my money? Do I put my money into rent seeking? I put my money into profit seeking? Do I put my money into speculation seeking? And what's the time horizon of my investments? Now, you and I are going to think like individuals. That's the problem, is that we actually don't matter. We're basically prey to these institutions and large holders. So, we're basically the people that they of by rolling up.
Martin, can you hear Curt?
No,
Oh,
it's stuck.
yeah. I think he might have lost internet for a second. Okay, let's. Hey, Curt, we
Yeah,
just lost you for like 10 seconds. Your screen was frozen.
I don't, I look, your internet connection is unstable.
Okay, so can you
Am I
repeat
back?
what you said? Yeah, you're back. Can you repeat what you said in the last 10, 15 seconds?
So all I'm trying to get across is that we've started out with debt instruments. We started out with consumer goods. Then we went into some debt instruments, right? And I'm like, okay, these debt instruments, well, I mean, if it's a bond, it's one thing, right? But if you get into mortgages, it could bundled together, it could be another thing. Then we went into stocks and the various, options, futures, swaps, forwards, all this, right? We went in all these things, which are again speculative. Now, the thing that was weird to me back in the day was when who was the uh, head of the central bank when the
Greenspan?
Greenspan. He was out there saying this, and Greenspan isn't an idiot, right? I mean, one of the things I admired about the guy is he actually understood how markets work because he did all his original research on cotton, which is like how does cotton actually make it between manufacture, production, and consumers? And he's really good at it. And I'm like, okay, this guy understands. But then he started believing this stuff, and I'm like, everybody can't insure everybody else, but that's what happened. And so what is everybody insures everybody else, there's no asymmetry, right? The risk is symmetrically distributed. So what's
Right.
the difference? There's no insurance at all. And I couldn't understand why he thought that these instruments were going to hold. And it was really strange to me. And I remember telling my friends at Microsoft who were leveraged out the hill, I said, this is going to fucking end, and it's going to end in a second, and you're going to get wiped out. I mean, I knew people that committed suicide.
In
So
in 2008?
no, in 2001.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
Right?
Were they essentially buying what Microsoft stock on the margin or something?
Yeah, they
Oh,
took their stock, they took their employee stock, and they margined it to buy more
right.
stock, right? And then they got wiped out.
Mm.
Which is why I'm not just don't buy in fucking margin. Just it's for big boys who want to play big boy games because they have big boy information that we don't have. So in any event, I mean, if you wanted to buy Nvidia on margin a month ago, I would have said, yeah, great, as long as it's you can take the loss, buy that margin, but sell and get off the margin
It,
call
yeah,
margin.
I think it's very much of a who's the greater fool kind of game,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Can you get out before and let the rest of the fools hold the bag? Because it's already
Right,
two
exactly.
billion. It's a $2 trillion company. And my mother the other day was saying that she's gonna go buy Nvidia. I was like, don't.
So,
Where do you think it's gonna go? $4 trillion? Come on.
all right, so I'm sort of trying to lead up to where this problem is that there are all these rents up there, right? And so what those rents are doing, in other words, it's the asymmetry exists, the irreciprocity can exist at all these levels, but the really big problem isn't the obvious, it's the unobvious. Remember, accounting, what is economics? It's the accounting for the seen and unseen. It's what we call full accounting, right? We account for the seen and unseen. And so when we get into this problem is that you have now people not investing in what they need to be investing in for the greater good, but essentially gradually moving all their investments into as many rents as possible and as short horizons as possible. And this seems to be this creates a self-fulfilling cycle until you get a breakdown. And that's where collapses come from. So our work, well, the only reason to talk about this, I mean, you're bringing it up, is our work seeks to break that cycle. Is that we're trying to get people, we have to look at investments as time, right? It's Hayekian triangles, production cycles, and say, well, we need, why is it that freaking Elon has to invent the new batteries? Why isn't that like strategic? We knew this in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Why in the 60s did we know the basic problem facing man is a battery with the energy density of gasoline? So why does fucking Elon have to do this in the private sector? Why isn't that a strategic initiative? If you want to know what the Chinese do best, it's that. They do everything else kind of weird. I mean, whatever, but the way they use the government as a venture capital firm and the mayors as CEOs, that's pretty fucking good shit,
I
right?
think
So,
system might they may start with good intentions. The system is so corrupt, and the
I know
incentives also very
I
misaligned.
know that,
Yeah,
but we wouldn't have to do it with corruption, right?
sure.
We could do it without that corruption where we had it, because the way it used to work is the military did all the and incentivized all the R&D, and the R&D was then given away
Hmm.
to the entrepreneurs. Well, the government could have kept that as a, why didn't the government keep a percentage of the shares of all these companies that it
Oh, they
licensed, it
should
gave
have.
technology to,
Right? They basically
right? And
just
then
gave away
what would
internet for
happen
free.
to our taxes? So our organization has worked on solving this problem up here, as well as all these problems down here. But my point being is that, this a lot of this nonsense down here where you have people in financial sector playing all these risk mitigation games that levels out the fluctuations in the economy, that's actually good. The fact that though there's asymmetry information that can fuck over retail investors pisses me off on a regular
Hmm.
basis. The fact that money is going into rents when there's no evidence that consumer credit, in the sense of anything that's purchasing a durable good, not food or whatever, but like a refrigerator, a dishwasher, a car, or a house, there's no reason to collect interest on it because the consumer buying it, the product is the end point. Does that make sense? That once that's happened, the good is just decreasing in value,
Hmm. Yeah, the
right? We
depreciation.
don't learn anything. What's that?
It's a depreciation.
Right? And we don't learn anything. We don't learn anything from the taxes, and the taxes come. And if you look at the money generated, it's abusively high to the individual, but it's irrelevant to the government. I mean, half of our population could pay no taxes, right, and not have to deal with all this shit at all,
Hmm.
and it would make a 2.5% difference.
Yeah.
3%. It's not worth it. It's not worth torturing all these people. One thing that bothered me with the Sarbanes-Oxley era is like I said I'd never run a public company again, and because all of a sudden everything's your fault, and there's no way you can know it. I mean, if you have you can't know that shit,
That's
right?
why they have to retain a large team of lawyers just to protect themselves from that, and then the productivity just slows down. It's the death
Exactly.
by
It was
paper,
this
thousand paper
incredible
cuts.
burden, incredible burden. I mean, it's bad enough. If you have a company, does your income flat like that? No, it's
Oh no,
fucking all over the
yeah,
place, right? And I build service companies because I want to work with smart people. Sorry. I build service companies. So what is our income like? I mean, it's freaking noisy as hell, right? And I grow a company. I try to double a company every year, every 2 years. somewhere in there. I figure out how to double a company, and that's all I'm trying to do is double the size of a company. It's not a terribly difficult strategy, right? It's how you do that might be. And so you double the company, everything. You what's your problem? You actually can't borrow the money to float the employees. Payroll. Does that make sense? Your whole problem is
Right, because
don't-
you're not a public company, so you can't exactly sell stocks to raise funds. So you have to beg and steal, borrow from the banks, which they charge you at whatever obscene rates.
right. And so I always look at this and I'm like, why? Well, you want to make American business really go crazy? Float, have businesses the ability to float payroll from the treasury, right? And then fucking screw them over if you fuck it up. Because already today, I mean, I don't know if most people know this, but one of the ways to pierce the corporate veil is not paying your employees. So I don't know if most people don't know that. I mean, that's why people get paid in this country. It's because if you don't pay your employees, they will take your house.
Oh, really? I did not know
Oh
that.
yeah.
I thought that
And
you by creating a C corp or something, it just
no,
separates you from the.
there are very few things that fraud and not paying your employees.
Okay.
You gotta pay your employee. It doesn't matter what else you do, you pay your employees.
So if you can't pay your employees, you might as well just go bankrupt. Declare bankruptcy.
If you can't pay your employees, you go bankrupt before you can't pay your employees. Because the
Right,
minute you,
right.
yes,
Because
right.
otherwise, then they can take your house.
Although, yeah, and everything. They're not nice about it because that's how they protect the American worker from irresponsible. That's why you see a lot of companies just in the middle of the night. It's a trucking company recently just come out and say, all right, we're declaring bankruptcy. You don't have to show up work anymore because they paid them Friday and they announced it Saturday because we can't make the next payroll.
Mm.
Now, I've been in a position 2 or 3 times where I can't make payroll because the customers that I expect, like, when you have like 50% of your business at a company like Microsoft, if they're off by a day, right, it's like a
Oh,
big
yeah.
difference, right? So you have to go to your bank and say, hey, I got these receivables coming in tomorrow. I need an overnight loan for this. I've had this happen a couple of times. And it caught us once on surprise, so I think we were a day late. Right. And that's because you're a growth company.
Mhm.
Like if you're a company that's just trailing along at, 2% or 3% growth every year, or just beating the inflation, it doesn't make any difference. But if you're doubling every year, I mean, your whole problem is, I mean, I used to give this thing called the money talk, right? Which is, it was I explained how money worked in the business and all businesses to all employees who came in, and it took a whole day. And I covered how money, the origins of money and how it works, right through how the money flowed through our business. And when I tell a developer, I want to make you understand, you understand. Now, how long do you have to work here before I actually get the first dollar of profit from you?
I think I'm cheating. I think you mentioned something like 2 years in the
Yeah,
past. Yeah.
it's 2 to 3 years, depending on how utilized you are. So, I mean, what do you think we have the highest retention in the industry for? Because I don't make any money until you've been here a while. So, so anyway, so to get down to the point, uh, I think that this is one of those things where thinking we as the consumers, uh, with the stock market and the stock market, the financial markets, whether they're debt, because everything's a debt instrument, right? I mean, a stock is a debt instrument, and a loan is a debt instrument, and a bond is a debt. I mean, it's basically debt instruments. So in the field of debt instruments, um, the real bad stuff is invisible to us because we take it for granted. Yet it's the financial sector that causes all the problems that we face. It's great that it provides speculative advantage to encourage our consumers, and the fact that business is so easy to do here versus every other country, financing is so easier to do versus every other country, and bankruptcy is so tolerable versus every other country. That helps us be really great entrepreneurs in this country. But on the other hand, you have the other problem where, as the ordinary consumer, whether you're a consumer of in other words, a retail investor, or you're a consumer who's simply trying to live your life, there's a lot of asymmetric extraction going on. So it's indirect. And this is the example I use, is that corruption when I lived in Russia and Ukraine is visible to you. If you own a business, they come in and they basically shake you down, right? If you get pulled over by a cop, you have to pay them money, right? It's that kind of stuff, right? But it's actually fairly small. The problem with corruption in our system is it's actually invisible and it's vast. So I spent a whole fucking hour on this now. I apologize for taking that point, but the real issue is, yeah, there's asymmetry of knowledge, but the worst asymmetry of knowledge isn't in the stuff we're aware of. It's in the stuff that's systemic that we're not
Yeah,
aware
it
of.
just
We
pervades
take for
through
granted.
it pervades through the entire system, and you don't even know where it all goes.
It's horrible. I mean, if from our rough estimates, and I worked on this for a long time, it's it's trillions every year,
Mhm.
right? And so you got to say, well, what's that doing to our people? And that's before we account for the arbitrage. Now, you brought up arbitrage, right, in the financial sector, but what about labor arbitrage?
Mhm.
Right. So is it really cheaper to get, I mean, I bought this kills me. I think I told you the story. I bought a speaker from a company in Shanghai the other week, last month. And the speaker's a 4-inch subwoofer, right? It's because I have this little fancy Bose system on my desktop, and I lost my subwoofer when one of my moves, so I wanted the subwoofer. So I had to go buy the unit, and then I had to go and order a new speaker for it. It cost me $24
Mhm.
for a speaker that should cost $50, right here in the United States. It was manufactured bill here, it should cost $50 to $60. I bought it and it got shipped internationally,
Mhm.
right? To me for whatever it was, $23, $24. That's just okay. Now, is the money I saved there really useful? Is that really good? That's an arbitrage I'm not sure for.
I think
Now
what
the
it did was it's actually loss for the populace on both sides. But you think
yes,
that in China they would gain, but actually no. I know a lot of Chinese that they're essentially on a perpetual treadmill, right? They
yeah,
can't get off of it because the cheap goods that they produce is what keeps the CCP in power, which then uses it to run tyranny around them.
that's
And
right.
here, right, we outsource our manufacturing at the loss of um, what do we call it? At the loss of the middle class
Right.
and the reproductive genome of the middle class, which is the backbone of this country. And it made the globalists, those who can somehow hitch their wagon to the globalization on both sides, rich at the expense of the people, at the expense of the
Thank you.
genetic stock of the people.
Thank you. Well done. Um, so that I think that answers the question, right? We focus on, I have this problem with libertarians all the time. You focus on what you can see, right? But you're not focusing on what you can see is, I mean, it sounds silly, but a lot of what goes on in the financial sector just makes a lot of goddamn sense, right? It's when you sell goods that you sell silly things like credit default swaps, right? On mortgages that are falsely credit rated, right? And during a heated economy, and you're all insuring each other, it makes no fucking difference. Everybody insuring everybody is nobody insuring anybody. So that was pretty horrible. But the real issue is that that we are borrowing from ourselves, but all the interest is being captured as rents. I mean, if you want to take a trip to Disney World and put that on a credit card, that's different. That's not that's not that's not a production issue. But if you want to buy a car and you're paying interest on a freaking car, I mean, there used to be, I don't know if it's true as true as it used to be. GM used to make all its money from financing its cars, not its cars themselves.
Yeah, I think GM's it probably still is the case, right? GM is actually one huge bank. It's not. It was a hobby of producing cars, as they say.
I can't remember, like $200,000 worth of computers and GM financed it. This is back in the 80s. And I'm like, I'm nobody. What are you crazy? I mean, I was literally thinking, are you crazy lending me this money? Right. So I computerized this company. I don't know. I thought it was like GM. Why is GM doing this? Makes no sense, but they're a bank. All right. So I think we killed this one. Did we get this one
So
answered?
we've been going on it for an hour. The one thing we did not touch on is crypto. I know you.
Oh,
Yes, I.
I would like that because I can't understand why people don't understand what I'm talking about. Right. I am a supporter of crypto for every reason except the one the libertarians care about. I think it helps with bankless. It cuts out the middleman. It reduces all these arbitrary transaction costs. I mean, it's fantastic. On the other hand, if you think it's going to compete with the state for fiat currency, you're out of your fucking mind. Because there is no way. I mean, we've seen them shut it down, right? Shutting this down is trivial. And so I said if you get to if it's going to do all these things, title registries, smart contracts, whatever. Uh, 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 I'm trying to avoid going down too much of a litany here, but I mean, it has all these things. For me, the thing I care about is I want to get rid of the bankless problem. I want to make the poor people have the ability to get paid digitally so that they keep 100% of their pay. That's what I care about.
Mhm.
Right. So, and the for that to happen, a couple of things happen with the technology, and I don't think it's possible. The transaction speed has to go up without the risk going down, right? And the ability to not have to keep the entire chain alive to do it is got to be solved. My view is everything crypto does would be better served monolithically. And I know I'm right on this. It's not going to be right. It's just that nobody likes that idea, but it would be better served monolithically because then all transactions, you could create a star system, star chamber. I wanted to say star chamber, a star system that can update, that can work in basically infinite number of transactions per second. Then it can function as a real currency. Um, but so far what I see is it acts a lot like gold, and I can totally believe in during its ride up, it's going to become a store of value. I didn't expect the institutions to try to, because the only reason it exists today is the
Mhm.
institutions affected it. So the institutions have wanted. Now, the minute the banks get involved, and that's going to happen, I think, if it gets over 100 grand, which is I think it's going to now, then the banks get involved, then it's done. That's when banks start holding assets in crypto, then we're going to see some cool shit happen. Right now, that's great. But if anybody thinks that the Fed is going to let somebody produce a competing currency that avoids taxation and avoids information, you're fucking high.
Right.
Avoiding the middleman is great, but avoiding taxation, avoiding information, or making it more difficult to use monetary policy and fiscal policy to be able people are fucking high. Because what they'll do is they'll say we're going to just develop Fed coin, and we're going to give everybody 30 days to, or even less than that, to sell all to swap for Bitcoin at this particular price, and then they're going to outlaw anything to make use of it.
Yeah, I think we briefly touched on this a few months ago in
Yeah,
terms
but
of
I get shit for it all the time.
yeah.
It's like I don't I just can't understand why I make the same argument every time. I'm not. I'm saying it's not money. It's basically it's token money, right? It's a money fiat money is a money substitute, right? Because money is hard money. Money is
God's money, gold
Money
or
is
whatever.
money, right? Everything else is a money substitute. Well, I mean, if you look at my chart, which I drew up back in, I don't know, 212 or something, it's an innovation because it acts like token money and a share of a share, right? So a token is indivisible, but a share is divisible, right? This is a divisible share of a thing that acts like a token. And I'm like, okay, well, you can use a token in the network, like you go to the amusement park and you get a ticket. You can use the ticket in there, and there's usually a loss involved, which is why they sell tickets. But so what? So it works fine. I'm not complaining about anything other than you're not going to get the government to tolerate this for anything that is a threat to the capacity, the necessity of being able to use the dollar as as a means of regulating the economy.
I think how we concluded last time is that the ability to print money, the ability to essentially print legal tender is a power that no government will give up.
They won't, and they can't. They get crushed. I mean, look what
Mm.
happens today. You know, I mean, look how powerful we are because we have the reserve currency. I mean, and all this stuff about these alternate, I mean, the BRICS and stuff. That's fucking nonsense. There's nothing, no money in that.
Special drawing rights from the EU, whatever.
Anyway, so I don't think my problem with Bitcoin all along was two things. It's not money; it's a share. Right. All right. And secondly, technically it's a share, and this is the virtue of these shares is like money, they're divisible. So if I want to give you 50 cent, 50, this much of it, I can give you this much of it, right? Um, the second thing is that uh, it's so you can't claim it's money. That's my problem with it, because that's misrepresenting what it is. And then the second thing is if you think if it's gonna make fiat money go away, you're fucking high. Because I mean, there's no government that could survive today competitively without the capacity to have fiat money.
So I don't want to drain all the time in there, but I just want to clarify one thing, or rather try to clarify one thing. So when I think of money, I think of money as a intersubjective construct. It only has value because we all believe it has value. Even when you say hard money, gold or silver, or whatever, this thing only has value because throughout the world, I show someone a piece of gold, they are going to think of it as valuable for the fact that it's useless for everything else. But you
It's not
can,
useless. It's not useless. I mean,
more or less. I mean, as a metal, it's not, it's soft, it's too soft, right?
oh,
And
yes, okay.
it's
So
not really, especially gold versus silver. Silver is an industrial input. You could call it a commodity and it's using a lot of things. Gold are used in very few things. Maybe, as what is it, gold-plated contacts on these electronic components and so on. But other than that, it's mostly as a stored value. But even then, it's only money in that we believe it has value. And I'm
yeah,
sure
of
you've
course.
heard of the island stone money by Milton Friedman and these Pacific Islanders. They don't have access to gold or anything, but instead they have these giant stone shells that they use as money, and it's only
Mhm.
because they believe it has value. But in that sense, wouldn't maybe not Bitcoin because transaction cost is just too high, but some kind of ledger network that has the properties you're talking about, couldn't that be digital money?
Absolutely. That's what I said.
Yeah.
There's no making the same crypto technology available, but in a monolithic form, so that you can create transactions without this all this compute and energy burning, right? To try to make it, or this attempt to produce algorithms that are irreversible, which there aren't any. This, I mean, we're going to solve it. It just doesn't make sense. But if you have this, I mean, it's you can produce all this transactions per second we want with, and it can be insured. This is the other reason we need fiat currency, is so we can insure a digital currency, right? You know, you don't have to, in other words, these two things can be the same. But I would also be very leery of a world where they took our money from us. In other words,
Oh, you
the
mean
real
actually
money.
hard physical money, right? Just
Uh,
digital only and no
we
hard
can,
physical.
yeah, digital I mean, today that's really the way it is. I mean, there's so much money and so many American dollars in circulations. This is fucking hysterical, right? But I mean, if you look at what's on the books, because it's mostly credit. I mean, most of the money that people talk about is credit money,
Hmm.
which means it's debt, which
Hmm.
means it's a number somewhere, right? So we already live in this digital world. I mean, frankly, we've lived
Yeah.
in it for hundreds of years. So, but we already live in this digital world where most of the money is just a record of an obligation, and that's fine. There's no problem there. I don't see that at all. Not so. The issue with Bitcoin is I don't think they're going to solve the technological problem permanently. And if they do, in other words, enough to make it a cash equivalent. But again, I say that's a defense because they can't make it a cash equivalent that preserves the monolithic structure of the government's central processing of money. And I think so. I keep saying the fact that it's actually not a good money is safety for it.
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, it's a safety for it. I mean, it's not, it's too difficult to use. It's too risky for ordinary people. And it's too slow with too high a transaction cost for anything. But but so are stocks. Stocks have a high I mean, not for everybody, but for most of us. What does it cost now for a trade? 30 bucks or something like that?
Oh no, I think it's a fraction. Probably next to
For
zero.
me, in what?
When you purchase a share of stock, the transaction cost is very low, or at least the commission wise.
Yeah, I think whenever how much is a trade
There are even brokerage houses that essentially charge you zero commission.
per trade? What do these guys do? It's 25 bucks each.
From
Yeah,
from what brokerage?
I'm just going through them. I'm gonna list it.
Huh.
Cost per E-Trade, Schwab. Can be up to $75. Yeah, I don't. Each charge of trading a broker. So you must use one of the, well, I don't want to be nosy, but I assume you don't use one of the big firms.
No, I do use one of the big firms, or maybe it's just because I have an account with them forever and they charge me no commission. But the commission may be hidden, right, in terms of price arbitrage.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I see. So almost every trade I've ever done, I set a price, right? And I'm like, whenever it gets there.
Well, yeah, the limit orders, which is what I do.
Yeah, okay. All right. So
Okay, I think this question is now broken the record, the longest answer ever. We should move on.
well, I mean, we could have talked. I mean, if I'd have taken that question, I'd have thought about it and I'd written it down as how to cover it. It would have been 10 steps in with a lot of examples. So I mean, we could talk about this subject all day long because we didn't even go in
I
to
know.
the nuances. All I was trying to do is do what I usually is create an arc from the consumer to the institutional investor to the effect on the economy, the effect on the people, right? I was just trying to create that arc, right? And so the problem is you can see these things over here, but we don't see those things way over there, and it's those things over there that are raping and pillaging our people. To corrupt our, it's like my Russian friends used to say, so well, Russian corruption is right in front of you, but I mean, you're essentially paying their salaries, right? But American corruption is invisible and it's freaking huge, and I sort of agree with it. I mean, I never mind giving a cop in Russia or Ukraine $20. Never bothered me. I give them $20, and that's a lot of money to them. Well, they only make $300 a month. All right,
All
move
right,
ahead.
let's move to question 2.
Maybe you need to write a sequel to what is seen and what is unseen.
That's very smart. Very smart, Martin. Well, you say a lot of smart things.
That's
I
the
would
first thing I said today.
What?
That's like the first thing I said today.
We're not, you don't, you're, this isn't, this is like stuff I care about. I mean, if we
Okay.
get into politics, you'll have more to say than I will. I mean, it's just which thing we're both interested in.
So Curt,
Oh, you will still say more.
if you ever
What?
get to write that 10-pager or whatever, I would love to contribute because I love to get down to like the leaf nodes and paint a complete picture.
We the if I don't know, I don't know any longer because we've been working on the science and the foundations of the natural law, so that my mind has been in those spaces. So I haven't gone and looked at what the financial economic reforms are in the book versus what's online. I don't know. But as far as I know, we know how to fix each of these problems, and it's not hard because a few small things have very profound impact on the financial sector. Mostly what I emphasized is I want to fix that problem of moving from rent seeking to research and development. And that's mostly what I'm trying to produce. The second thing I'm trying to do is, because I don't understand why this is such a hard problem for the anti-AI crowd, is moving from producing consumption for a living to producing commons for a living is really easy to do. And I don't think that that's being said in the scary AI literature. And I've covered that topic as well. I mean, when you look at the world like we do, shit just makes fucking sense. It's not,
Well, my issue is that there is no reason why AI potentially couldn't produce commands other than just outright saying AI will not be doing this.
yes. Oh, right. Although, there's no reason, put it this way. I include in that the creation of society and harmony. This is too long of a, this is a really interesting topic. We should do a talk on this topic, because it's actually really fascinating. Automating everything so that nobody can do anything is different from automating everything that people would prefer not to do.
There's a lot of people who would prefer to not do anything.
Okay, well then they would have a.
Well, we'll have to make sure that through soft eugenics they don't produce the next generation.
Yeah.
Whoops,
Was
I
it?
guess my Nazi has came out.
I can't say this in public too often, but it's unfortunate that that are some of the are it's unfortunately some of the policies and behaviors of the National Socialists were so over applied because there's too much goodness in what they were actually trying to do. Much more like monarchy than French clerisy. Anyway, let's go and
Just
Martin's
so
got some.
yeah, I know. Just so I remember, you said we should do a separate talk on what AI and automation.
We should do what the economy under AI.
Okay,
If AI works, what's the economy look like?
I'm just gonna make a note of that.
Because you understand that for a variety of reasons we've made people really expensive. But if we make goods really cheap, we can make people really cheap. So I want to cover that issue, and I want to cover that making things beautiful is a pretty interesting way of doing things. And I can't imagine that. Very hard. See these things? Where is this camera? Oh, my camera's up here. See these things? It's very hard to do that. Very, 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 very hard to do that.
But not impossible.
Huh?
Not impossible.
It's impossible. It's impossible with current
time.
technology. It's impossible with current. In other words, in order to make this work, we need what we've been trying to produce is some sort of material that, when subject to a current, basically reacts like a muscle.
Oh yeah, you're
Which
talking about that. Like if you ever play BattleTag, there's this imaginary technology called My Armor, right? So you apply current to it. It's a look up BattleTag, which is Max and everything, but they're supposedly they move because of this thing called My Armor, which is like a strand of muscle, like synthetic muscle that when
right.
you apply energy, it contracts.
Yes. So if we can, they're trying this all the time, and it's we've seen it work, but it works with there's not enough force generated. So it's amazing that with that little force and that much chemistry, our muscles can do what they do with that degree of precision. And partly, like, if you look at the way robots or the AIs that work today, they're terribly primitive, because when you think of moving your arm and grabbing this coffee cup, right? It's when you think of coffee cup, the entire set of motions to grab it are computed at the same time. And so you have to only release what's been computed. You don't have to compute it in real time. Does that make sense? So they've got a long way to go to get there, just as they've got a long way to go. Let's hope if they can make the reason thing work, that'll be cool. All right, what are we doing next?
All right, question 2 from Tyler. I was discussing NLI ideas with a friend, and he presented the following question. When considering the subject of enforcing the truth of public speech, I am drawn to consider the basis by which truth is defined as the object of supreme importance in the discussion. It seems to me that the public engaged in this discussion in the minority takes the definition of truth, which limits its domain roughly to what can be established by observation and reason. I'm curious to know how the NLI interacts with the idea of eminent logician Curt Gödel and
like Gödel.
Gödel and Alfred Tarski, most specifically as regarding Gödel's incompleteness theorem and Tarski's undefinability theorem. These theorems illustrate thorny problems that must necessarily be somehow addressed when systematizing laws on the basis of the concept of truth, because they're fundamental exploits of the systemization of truth itself, and as they are replies to the famous Hilbert program, which I feel is a historical stream which most encapsulates the idea that I find in the public on this subject. I anticipate that these theorems are known to and explored by the NLI, though in some form not presently visible to me.
These theorems are about math only, but they do show us limitations of testifiability even within grammars of pure logic. In the real world, where we also have to do measurements, we're further limited by uncertainty and imprecision of these measurements, uncertainty in our understanding of causality, and predictions performed even with accurate measurements and accurate understanding of causality still being only statistical due to computational irreducibility of everything that's going on. That doesn't mean we cannot testify, it just means that every testimony will have some implicit error bars, and that in any case you can only testify to what you remember observing rather than directly to what happened.
Sometimes, Martin, when you talk like this is about as sexy as logic gets for me. That was, I mean, if I was a woman, I'd be all over you for this, because that was how sexy that was. Actually, that was fucking
It doesn't
brilliant.
seem to work on actual women, so
What?
doesn't seem to work on actual women.
Wow, you killed it. I don't know if there's anything to say. I think that what I'd like to say is that um, people wield this incompleteness theorem as if, and I again I wrote this. Oh, I was having this. I had to educate ChatGPT about this yesterday. It's fascinating. Um, Too bad it loses the you're right. It doesn't remember it because it should. But he's basically making a very uh, a statement about closed systems, and the proof basically relates to arithmetic. So as Martin says, I wrote a thing yesterday. I was like, imaginary reducibility, verbal reducibility, operational reducibility, computational reducibility, and mathematical reducibility. In that hierarchy, mathematical reducibility is the smallest set. We can imagine a lot of stuff. We can describe more stuff. Um, we can do more, do less stuff than we can imagine, and right. We can compute less stuff than we can do. We can mathematically describe less stuff than we can compute. And so I don't think, I think that Martin and I would tend to look at this problem as one of how can it be reduced? Right? Is that the best way to state it, Martin? A reduction always loses information on one hand and gains information on the other, meaning that there's very little we can't describe in the world at some degree of abstraction. And unlike numbers, which have only one reference, which is the name of the increment we're talking about, we can describe all sorts of things with extraordinary numbers of dimensions and complexities, basically infinite. There's no limit to what we can compose with. There's no limit what we can be composed with language, and there's no. And so the only question is how precisely can we describe it given the increases in causal density. So as we get down to the very small or up to the very large, causal density becomes very so high that you can't touch it, right? You can't describe it at a very small level. But this is why we say all language and all mathematics is purely statistical, meaning that it generally captures a pattern at some scale of reduction. So Martin's right. It's just there's no this people vastly overestimate what all that Gödel is saying, and Tarski is saying, and these are problems of mathematics. But I want to make the point that mathematics failed to develop its roots. Philosophy, even analytic philosophy, failed. Computability has said, okay, I understand why philosophy failed and mathematics failed. The reason is that the only thing you can do is construction, and even construction, computability, is only possible for things that can be constructed by whatever reducible formula you put into the construction. Yet, if we look at how people wayfind their way through the universe through explanations, you can always wayfind another level in a sort of very fractal method. You can wayfind a way to do something to explain something until there's no information left to disambiguate. So these statements are kind of
I mean,
explain. What?
I mean, you can always go down to increased precision, but eventually you'll get to the point where you cannot work with that information any faster than everything's happening.
Correct. So this has a problem because mathematics is looking for proofs, which is justifications. We're not. We're looking for proof of construction. Is it constructible? And if it's so we're looking at we're looking at, if we get information, what can we do? What mathematics is looking at, with this information, what can we do? So we're saying there's always more information, and math is not starting with that position. So of course you're going to end up with different. I mean, this is like the thing that you can write a grad course on this particular topic. I mean, why do we get, our questions keep getting harder? And they keep getting harder? I mean, anyway,
Like
so
I said,
no.
we have exhausted the low-hanging fruits.
So Martin's right. It doesn't mean we can't testify. We can. It just means that every testimony will have some error bars, right? Great. That's all we need to do. Right? It doesn't mean it isn't as true. I mean, the way we define true is satisfaction of demand for infallibility in the context in question. That's all we have to. It's true. Our true is true enough to not be false.
And also at the level of precision required to make a decision.
Right.
Also, Microsoft Math is counting rocks.
Again?
Microsoft Math is counting rocks.
Oh yeah. Did you see that 3-hour video Michael and I went through? He basically went through all those dimensions and gave me an education.
I did. I'm not sure I paid full attention to the whole thing.
Well, because he has to educate me like I'm a what elementary schooler basically, starting from the foundations.
He's incredibly good because he actually understands math. Some people understand how to do math. Very few people understand math. He actually understands math. It's fascinating. And he can communicate it, which is, I guess, is he a teacher or something like that? Is he a teacher or something
Yeah,
like that?
he
Yeah,
actually
that's why.
tutors kids in math.
He's a professional tutor, as far as I remember.
Mhm.
And he did an addendum to his lecture on his channel. I guess we could re-upload it.
Oh,
Wait,
okay,
what?
great.
Oh, you mean that separate video?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where is it?
I think he posted in the
I'll
channel
share
somewhere.
it in the chat.
So what is this? I mean, while you guys, can we do the next question while you're looking that up?
Yeah, let's do that. All right.
What's the story behind the Natural Law Institute logo, if there is one? And, okay, so Martin killed this
It's
one too.
from Taleb's Black Swan, where he names Black Swan events, those that come as a surprise, have a major effect, and are rationalized after the fact. This is in reference to events Curt expects are coming, as far as I understand. Earlier thinkers such as Hume also used the black swan as an example for the problem of induction, that no number of observed white swan can prove non-existence of black swans. This was, of course, before real black swans were discovered to solving the problem.
Thank you, Martin. That's about right. I would just clarify that it's like
That
this.
was a joke, by the way.
I think we understood that it was a joke. Hopefully everybody understood it was a joke. Why, Martin? Are you afraid people don't understand your sense of humor? I mean, it is a little dry, like desiccated dry, but it is a good sense of humor. Never respond.
This last part, this is not a joke, right? That's how I understood the black swan. It's the fragility of induction.
Correct. So the way I look at it is, here's how I looked at it. In the 80s, I was working on military AI, right? That's what I was working on. And so, and I was doing this in assembly language on very primitive computers because it was the 80s. And what I came to the problem is you can't really come up with a non-deterministic AI at that point. In other words, you could always defeat the computer because it couldn't create.
Just
Couldn't
like
be
random
created.
random numbers in computers aren't really random numbers.
Right. So this led me to understand the same thing that Taleb learned by betting on. Taleb learned, which is when he was working on investments. So what he was doing is looking for cheap and how to invest in cheap, improbable events with large returns. So you put $1 in, you're going to make $1 million out, right? So if he could make a lot of these, he could identify a bunch of these and do it, then you get it out. That was so I came to this, and so I came to the same conclusions he did by similar means. And so the way I look at this, the black swan is more akin to his fat tails, right? Which is that shit that you don't see is way more important than the stuff that you do. So you need to think about the world and not permissively, but anti-fragile, in an anti-fragile sense. And this goes to our world, which is we don't necessarily try to do good. We try to eliminate bad so that the goods can be expressed on the fat tails. What we don't want to do is have the bads expressed on the fat tails. So you try to get rid of the bads so that the goods can emerge on the fat tails, but the bads don't emerge. That I think I probably explained that better that time than most times. Yeah, I mean, I just blow it off because I figure people don't want to listen to me through that. So I just say, well, it's just the things we don't expect are more influential than the things we do expect.
All right. I think we've done that justice. Question number 4 from Curt. A warring civilization must be incrementally and aggressively punished until they either reform or collapse to the point where they're no longer a threat. What made this look like realistically with regard to primitive civilizations currently undermining the West?
Primary civilization. Probably something I won't agree on with Curt, but permanent exile is my answer. Banning other production in mainstream media and denying any and all positions of authority and influence to anyone found making business with them of any sort. They rely on attention and corruption, deny those opportunities to them even from abroad. And we are more than capable of retaliating against the Samson option. The hard part, as with everything, is getting our guys to power.
Well, Martin, this is like the typical thing. I don't disagree with you. I think because I've thought about our disagreements over the past month or so, not sure why, but I've thought about them because I don't really disagree with you on anything. I disagree with how to do things. And this might be I think it might be a failure on my part, but it might also be a benefit, and I'm not sure. The answer is that I'm not trying to say what to do. I'm trying to explain the problem so that people make the decisions. So I might recommend this solution just like you would, but I don't know how to describe it as I don't see it as my job. I see my job as saying, here's what the truth is, here's the law to put it in place. That's my job. What you choose to do about it as a people is a political decision. I think you would see this as foolish. Foolish because I'm trusting the people. And I think you're right. On the other hand, I'm not comfortable in my role, in my function as a scientist and saying you must. I'm only comfortable in saying here are the options. And I just think that's sort of like my job. It's not necessarily, I mean, because you're right. If we do that, you get rid of them and it's the problem. And I've said this before, throw them all into their own country. They'll be one of the most beneficial forces in that region on the earth.
No.
Well, no.
To themselves.
What?
For themselves, sure.
Right, that's what I mean.
But not for anyone around them.
That's fine. I'm not making that argument. I'm just saying they'll do fine. And I think that they'll probably grow into, like what we've seen recently, they'll grow into being adults where they haven't been in the past. So I don't like, we've said this before, you know, when you press me too much, it bothers me. It hurts my feelings a little bit. But I mean, because I feel like you
Sorry.
don't appreciate my position. But I don't ever disagree with you. I don't think, I mean, I never in other words, if you say something, I understand that you're right. I'm not willing to do that. That's probably the right way to look at it, because I don't think that's my job. I'm perfectly happy if you make that your job. But I don't think that's my job, if that's okay.
Okay, well, I would say that I'm not telling anyone what they must do either, but I'm involved in all this because I have a preferred outcome at the end.
Yes, yes. I don't think we're cohabitable. I don't think so. I don't think that, you know, and I don't know if that's everybody or 10% or whatever. And I don't know if it's genetic or cultural or both, but I don't like what I see. And I think you have had some opinions lately that it's more the culture or the religion than it is the genetics. Is that true? Is that my
The feminine personality, which is genetic, is definitely a prerequisite,
is
but
what?
it's
It's a
definitely a
prerequisite, but
prerequisite,
it's not
but it's
necessary.
not enough.
Right. So I agree with you on that. And so that's probably where I'm coming from, is that the 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 if we can solve that problem, I don't mind. But that whole culture has to go away.
That strategy is extremely self-reinforcing, so I'm very skeptical on fixing it.
I agree. Okay.
Uh, just clarification, when you say the strategy is very self-reinforcing, you mean the marrying with the in-group and keep on essentially keep that culture perpetuating through
The
genetic means?
separatist ethics of non-integration and asymmetric ethics within the separatist ethics is extremely uncool.
Right.
And their belief that they are morally correct is a problem because it's not true.
Yeah, to them, what's morally correct is what's good for them.
Yes.
Well, they justify it using metaphysical means.
Well, I don't, we understand this so clearly now. I mean, it's like, it's not hard to understand, it's like, but, I have I have a couple of people I care about very deeply, but they're just conservatives with a feminine bias in their social interactions. They don't have an ideological bias. So my view is that it's just a matter of, well, there's people that want to live that way, and they want to live in that fantasy world, and they need to leave. And the people who don't want to live in it, they can stay. I mean, that's how I view it. But I don't see it as I see it as my job to lay out the options. My preferred thing is, what do I prefer? I guarantee you, whatever you prefer, Martin, is what I prefer.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's just no question about it. Right? It's just, I have a job, and I see it as the most effective way to do the job is the way I do it, because it creates the least, it says, I'm educating, I'm not telling. And I think that's the best way for me to get my message across. But hey, dude, if I could move to Norway today, right, I would, if that's how I want to live. I mean, the truth is that actually isn't true. I feel like I shouldn't point this out, Francis, but I would be happy to live in a world with you and your family in it, right? I mean, I love you, man. I mean,
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
you said that before. I think
Right. I mean,
you said to the extent that maybe Eastern Asians is only other compatible race?
I just think whites and East Asians are compatible because we're both heavily neotenous. But it doesn't appear that other people can do it. And if they can't do it, then we can't live together. And that just seems to be the case. And what bothers me about Russians, I fucking love those people, but can they do it?
And there are just some inherently negative consequences to mixing. There's no way around that either.
All right. So I don't know. I don't really disagree with you, Martin, and I want to live in the same world you do. I just view my job as
Okay.
I view my job as what I do. And I have to constrain myself all the time. And it partly has helped me not be so angry. And not being angry has been good for me. So I tend
I'm
to.
not saying any of this out of anger.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if I think about what needs to be done to bring about what we would both like, instead of think about how do I advise people to come to the right conclusion, I get angry, and I don't want to be angry.
Okay.
Okay, what do we got? We got one more?
Do we have time for one more? All right.
Yeah.
Question number 5 from Anon. Given the controversial stances held by the Institute on matters relating to race, relating to genetics, integration, marriage, and giving grounding of the Institute and Western civilization in the European race, and given the integrated society already now exists in the United States, what should an individual expect and anticipate regarding race relations while organizing for the Institute at the local level? What distinctions should be made in the recruiting process given the nature of outliers and individuals, as well as the importance of behavior extending to the population? The race science for the unacquainted is not convenient to learn. Even as a white man, it wasn't for me. So should I warn my intelligent East Asian and South Asian friends whom I see value in for the movement? What if an intelligent black friend emerges? How to navigate all of this? I feel like I should have answered this question. But Martin, go ahead.
And after me, this is another one that isn't set in stone. It obviously makes sense to keep those that show investment into our civilization and their families. There are several people like that on the team, one right on this call, who we'd have to be really dumb to want to deport. If we're more lenient, anyone who's demonstrated total integration and no one anti-white, anti-Western, or otherwise non-Christian Abrahamist sentiments can stay. But the goal of primacy of European peoples in the West and primary purpose of the Western civilization being ensuring their persistence, upon which that civilization relies, isn't up for debate.
Oh, that's brilliant. What would you say, Francis?
Well, I'm just gonna make it simple. The way I see it, I kind of see myself as a adopted child versus a genetic child of the civilization. And so as the adopted child, I have to work extra hard to prove my worth, which is what I'm doing now.
But I think you're fucking amazing.
If everyone saw it that way, we'd be in a different situation.
That's really the issue. I have the same position as, because there's two, so we have to answer not our positions, because my position is the same, is that just don't fucking be a friend, just don't undermine us, right? That's all I care. Integrate and don't undermine. I mean, it's not complicated. Let's answer the question though, and that's that our attitude is let 1,000 nations bloom. If it works, right, don't try to make it that everybody's got to be one way. If you want to live in this kind of place, great. If these people want to live in isolation, that's great. I mean, the Jews do their isolation thing. What are the Mennonites and the Amish do? They live their way. the more of that, the better. The thing is that our way lets you do that. And so I want to live, as Martin just said, in a place where we all get along and we're not trying to undermine at least what we consider the West, which is this high responsibility, high trust civilization that puts truth before face and frankly drags mankind pretty quickly out of its ignorance and poverty. There's not that we don't hand out that we're perfect. I mean, we could beat up on democracy because that's what the next question's about. We could beat up on that all day, but the real issue here is that we just don't want to have people undermining us and our civilization and the benefits to us and the benefits to mankind because of the technology that is our civilization.
Yeah, I would say that if we care about the gene pool at all, our policies should incentivize near breeding, like through people staying in the same place over generations.
Well, I mean, the rate at which East Asians and Europeans are inbreeding, that's having a huge effect. I don't, to me, can I even say this? For neotenous peoples to interbreed is not a problem, but whenever you have an asymmetry of neoteny, the average is always lower. And so
when you say the average is always lower than even the
no,
lower levels, even than the low parent, or just
no, it's always in the middle,
Oh,
right?
sure.
It's always so there's always a compromised position. And the problem we see is that both the Europeans and the East Asians, the Europeans are more borderline and the East Asians are slightly higher, and that you want to keep that generally neoteny and with it the intelligence that comes with it above 105 if at all possible, and as close to 110 as at all possible if we want to continue to be in an advanced civilization. So there. Go ahead.
Well, one thing about the white and Asian mixing, it only goes one way for the most part. No offense to Francis, but all the statistics show Asian males as least desirable.
Yeah, I'd say so. Usually it's Asian women, white men.
And still more desirable than Indians, of course.
I think it depends on the grade of Indians, right? If we're talking about, well, not gonna go there.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I know that when I went to live in other countries, I couldn't do it in Canada because it's too offensive to me. But when I went to, I didn't think about it that way, but integrating into Canada was offensive to me. Whereas integrating into Russia and Ukraine was not offensive to me. I thought it was something I would try to do. It's actually way harder than I thought it would be, because there's pretty monumental shift culturally, but I really did enjoy it.
Anyway, my point was rather that if there's not a stable gene pool, then it's impossible to produce stable adaptations.
Yes.
They're inevitably thrown into the mix and destroyed.
All right, so I want to make sure we answer the question. How do you answer the question? The question is that the Institute's position is let 1,000 nations bloom. In other words, experimentation is great. That means you're going to have some people who are just going to be left wing, everybody-ish type stuff, and you're going to have different people who want to be Puritans and everything in between. And this means that we create a place for everybody to be happy. And that if we do that, then evolution and markets will do their job, and we will learn from that. But this idea of monopolies is just not helping us. I mean, there are fundamental rights people need to have, but being liked and desired is not one of them.
So I specifically want to address this question here, since I have some experience with local groups. What should an individual expect in regarding to race relations while organizing for the institute at local level? I would say that if someone who isn't white wants to have learned the science and wants to join in at the local level, give them a chance. As to what to anticipate,
Yeah,
I think it depends on how it works out, right? If they are like me and really pay into the system, then why not just and show reciprocity? Why not just let them be part of the group? If not, just like you would with anyone of the white race who isn't paying into the system, then why have them be part of your group?
that's right. So remember, our purpose of race, of acknowledging sex, class, race, and culture is because we're trying to promote the idea that homogeneity of interest produces a high trust polity with low power distance and maximum redistribution. Whereas heterogeneous polities do the opposite. They incentivize concentration of power in the state, high power distance, and a minimum of rights. So, and some usually overstatement of privileges. So we don't want the conflict to arise. So what we're looking for is just people who want to get along with each other. Um, um, it's I don't think I think that's all we're trying to get across with the race issue. And it's particularly important in what I say is that the primary difference between the races should be treated as a class size issue. In that if you're a race of people, you've developed you develop at a certain rate of neotenic evolution, and you have a culture that you've come from that's been inherited, and that if you're in a group of your own people, you will see that you are that class is a biological construct. In other words, it's related to genetics, and it roughly means how much responsibility you can carry. So what you will find is people from the more neotenous civilizations and people or people from the higher classes can carry more responsibilities than the people at the bottom can. And so for every group, every race or subrace or ethnicity, you develop norms, traditions, and values to suit the median of your distribution, which is where the most people are. And that's what's necessary for you. And the people in another distribution is different. So class behaviors differ based on the responsibilities they can handle. So what this means is when people can handle different responsibilities, they expect different norms, but worse, they will segment into racially separate groups economically because economics rewards responsibility. So you're going to get natural conflict between groups if your difference is large enough to create a demand for separate manners, ethics, morals, traditions, institutions, given your differences. So it's not complicated. All we're saying is reduce the amount of conflict, because conflict is created only by proximity. And if we trade through markets, it's not a proximity problem. So all we're trying to do is create a world where the markets satisfy the needs for the different groups of people. So that's how you explain it to others, in the sense that that we mean it as our organization for people who want to participate. It's just as Francis and Martin said here. If people want to get along with you, that's fine. Then work together. We're not trying to we're trying to create a rule of natural law where people cooperate because they have common interests and they don't impose costs upon the others. we don't, how that's organized is totally up to you. Who do you want to cooperate with?
Well, I'm really saying it here is like we'll probably have to accommodate these people and they will have to be absorbed, but continuous outbreeding is an issue,
Yes.
even within one race.
Yeah,
How do
although
you outbreed within one race? You mean between social classes?
No, I mean like different nationalities or even different localities. It means adaptations cannot form and last.
near breeding is best for just genetically over time, but that just produces the highest chance of continuous correction, because mutation is pretty endemic. So that's all we're just trying to say. He's just trying to say is, yeah, uh, gene pools are useful, and what we normally find is the only people who switch gene pools are people on the margins at the top and the bottom of each class. That tends to rotate because you can get a better deal, right? You can get a better deal by rotating, but it's not, the numbers are still around 15%, I think. Is that right? Does anybody know the numbers?
Well, but over many generations, that is very high.
Yeah, I thought 15% sounded pretty high, but then I haven't really looked into statistics.
I'm pretty sure it's about 15%.
It's obviously very different by race and who they mate with.
Uh, %19 and 19. What's up? It started 3% in 67 to 19%. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay. All right. I think we did a good job. I need to go have lunch.
Yes.
All right. Francis, thank you for hosting these and all the work you do. I really appreciate all the work you do for us.
You're
Martin,
welcome.
I haven't talked to you much lately. Thank you. Enjoy talking to you every time. All right. Anything else to close with? No. Francis, anything to close with?
Nope.
No. All right. All right.
And
This is
we should be back on the usual schedule. This last month we had to skip one since I was not able to host it, and next office hour
And I
will
was
be in
gone.
2 weeks.
all right. So we won't tell everybody. So I understand you went to Epstein's Island. Is that what happened?
What, me?
No.
No.
Yeah. That's what you, I thought
Epstein's
that's what you
Island.
said you were going.
If I went to Epstein's Islands, would be to take a flamethrower to it and burn it down to cleanse it.
I love you, man. All right, guys. Thanks for a great talk. It's again, it's Friday, March 1st, 2024. This has been our office hours meeting for today. We got through what, 5 questions? That was pretty good.
Yeah, I was afraid we're only going to go through two because the first one took more than an hour. That's got to be our
Love
record yet.
No,
Take
our
care.
record, well, we've once answered only one question, and I think that was a shorter
Yeah,
session.
but that was a short session. That was like an hour session.
All right, guys. Love you.